Hi, for this video what I want to do is show you how to build the frequency distribution portion of this project. So in the last video that I did, I showed you how to build the descriptive statistics, and now I'm going to show you how to add on to it with the frequency distribution. So remember, our data came from the data that you collected during the second part of your project, so phase 1 part B. Okay, so now we are going to build the frequency distribution. So we've already got the descriptive statistics built, and if you did not watch that video, then make sure that you watch that one first, and then you would watch this one. All right, so the frequency distribution, let's say that we want to do this one in a nice purple color, and again, I'm just going to highlight this whole up here, and I'm going to bold it so it stands out. And then maybe we want to put a fill on the back of this just to set it aside as a heading. And so you would just come down to Format Cells and just pick a fill color. So I'm just going to use purple, okay. And then for this part down here, and I'm not sure where it needs to go to, but maybe I want to go ahead and select all of this and just make it a purple font so that I know that it's going to match with everything else. All right, so if you remember from class, the class width is the distance from one lower limit to the next lower limit. And the formula to find it is the maximum minus the minimum divided by 2, and then you always want to, not divided by 2, divided by the number of classes, and you always want to round it up. So in Excel, there is a feature that allows you to round up. And most of the time, this will round up. If it's a decimal of any kind, it will round it up. If it's a whole number, it will not round it up, so you do have to watch for that to happen. And I will show you how to see if it causes a problem. So what we wanted to do, again, remember our formula is our maximum minus our minimum divided by the number of classes. So in order to group together the max minus minimum first, I have to add a new parenthesis inside of this. And then I'm just going to select the maximum value, which is cell H2, and I'm going to subtract from it the minimum value, which is cell G2, and I'm going to close that parenthesis. So now you can see that it's in red, that they have done H2 minus G2 is grouped together. And then we're going to divide it by our number of classes. So our number of classes is cell I2. Okay, so I'm going to use cell I2. Make sure that you don't think that this is a 12, because dividing it by 12 would give you 12 classes, and that's going to cause problems. Okay, so the next thing it asks us for in this formula is the number of digits. So I want to round it to the nearest whole number because I'm dealing with whole number values. So I'm going to put 0. That means that I don't want any decimal places. I want it to be the nearest whole number. And then close my parenthesis and hit enter, and it will automatically put up the class width here. I'm not going to do any currency features in here. I'm just going to keep it as a number just to keep it simple. And because we rounded this to the nearest whole number, I am going to get rid of the decimal places. Okay, so if you want to get rid of decimal places, like up here for the minimum and the maximum, since they didn't have any decimal places, I could go ahead and get rid of those. So if you want to get rid of decimal places, that's how you can do it. Okay, the class lower limit, if you remember, starts at our minimum value. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to hit equals, and I'm going to select the cell that has the minimum in it. I don't want to actually type in this value, because later when I go to copy and paste this and change it for the next set of data, I want to make sure that I'm using the commands, and I don't want to type any numbers here. The only number that I want to type is the number of classes, just because that's going to be the same for all of them. So only if it's a constant do you want to type in the number. Our minimum changes from one data set to the next, so I want to make sure that I select the cell. Okay. And then if you remember, to find the next class lower limit, you're going to do equals this value plus our class width. Well, the class width isn't going to change when I bring this down. So I'm going to do something that'll make it easier for me to just drag this whole formula down. Right now, if I hit enter on this, it will give me the value. And again, I want to get rid of the decimal places on this one, okay, because I don't need them. But if I go to drag this down, it's just going to keep dragging the same number over and over again. Okay, and I don't want it to do that. I want to make it to where it'll drag the formula down. So I'm going to hit Control and Z. Control and the letter Z as in zebra will undo the work that you did. So if you make a mistake, just hit Control and Z and it'll get it back there. So I want to revisit this formula. I want to keep D5 the same. And so in order to do that, I need to put dollar signs in front of this, in front of the D and in front of the 5 to keep it a constant. The shortcut for doing that is highlighting and hitting the F4, and notice it automatically puts the dollar signs in front of it. And so that will make it easier than having to type in this dollar sign and this dollar sign. So again, I just highlighted what I want to stay the same, and I hit F4. Okay. Again, I just made a mistake, so I don't want to do that. I have to hit enter after that. And then now when I drag this down to get my 6 classes, so I would have 3, 4, 5, 6. So make sure that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classes that match your number up here. Okay, you can see that it automatically changed the formula, that now it's doing the number in front E9 plus my class width, and that's what I want. For the class upper limit, remember that the class upper limit is always one less than the next class lower limit. So to get the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type equals, and then I'm going to select the cell that I want to work with, and I'm just going to do -1. So I just want it the nearest whole number underneath and hit enter. And again, I want to get rid of the decimal places. Okay, I just want them to be whole numbers. And for this, you have 2 options. I could continue to use the same formula until I get down to here, where it will fill in my values, where it'll just do this one minus this. And then at the end, I have to fill it in. Or the other option, and I'm just going to, again, hit Control and Z and undo what I just did. Okay, the other option is we know that our distance from one upper limit to the next upper limit is going to be the same as the distance from one class lower limit to the next lower limit. So another option that we could do is we could use that same formula again that we use for the class lower limit, where we take the cell above and then we add to it the class width, and then again keep the class width as a constant by hitting F4. And then I get the same value. The 6845 was the same whether I use the first formula or the second. This way you can get all the way to the end. And when you get to this point right here, this is where you want to check to make sure your maximum value is in your last class. So if you notice, the 13702 is not in here. And so this is something that can happen with the round up, is that means that when I did the maximum minus the minimum, and I'm just going to go over here to do it really quickly. Don't do this in your project, but I just want to show you why it did this. When I did this minus this and divided it by the number of classes, so when I divided it by the number of classes, it went in exactly with 1,714. So if you notice, if I increase it, it goes in evenly, and that's the problem with round up, is if it goes in evenly, it will not round it up to the next whole number. So if you miss your maximum value, then what you are going to do, and again, I don't want this here, so I'm just going to Control and Z and get rid of this that I typed over here. So what I can do is when that happens, when I miss my max, I can just come up here and I can add 1 to it. And then automatically it will adjust it. And now we can see that 13702 is contained in my last class upper limit. Okay, you only have to add this +1 if your maximum value is missed. So if your maximum value is missed, you would add the +1. If your maximum value is contained, you do not have to do that. Okay, it's just one of those things that happens sometimes. and you don't know until you do it. So that's your check to make sure that your maximum value is not missed. That's why we round up, because otherwise it will get missed. All right, the midpoint, moving on. The midpoint is the average of your class lower and your class upper limits. So in order to do this, I'm just going to, and I can use equals average, that's the easiest way, or I can use the formula this plus this divided by 2. So I'm just going to use equal average, and I want to do the average of these two cells. And then just hit enter and it will find the midpoint for me. Okay, if it's a whole number, then you can go ahead and get rid of the decimal places. If it's 0.5, then leave it to 1 decimal place. Okay, so if it's 0.5, just leave it to 1 decimal place. And just in case that happens in the next ones when you copy and paste, midpoint, I would just go to 1 decimal place, because it is possible that if the average, if the sum of these is an odd number, it's not going to go in evenly, and you would need the 0.5 to show up. All right, moving on into frequency, and this formula can be a little bit tricky. So for this one, what we want to do is we want to use the count if formula. Okay, and we have two, and it's really the count ifs formula because we have two ifs. We want it to be where we count the data if it's greater than your class lower limit, but less than your class upper limit. Okay, so I'm going to start typing in equals count IFS. So I want to use the count IFS, and it's going to ask me for the criteria range. So my criteria range is going to be from A1 to A25, and this is not going to change. So I don't want my criteria to change when I drag my formula down. So remember how we put the dollar signs in for our adding our class width? We want to do the same thing. So I'm going to highlight the A1 to A25, and I'm going to hit the F4 button. The F4 button will automatically put in the dollar signs. You can type in those dollar signs, but it takes a little bit longer. So then I'm going to just right arrow key out of there, out of it being highlighted, and hit comma. And then I have to put in quotation marks that I want it to be greater than or equal to, end the quotation marks. And then I want to select the cell that I want it to be greater than or equal to. So I want it to be greater than or equal to this value. Now it's going to look for criteria range 2. Well, my criteria range 2 again is A1 through A25. And again, I don't want that to change, so I would just highlight on it and hit F4. Okay, and then right arrow will unhighlight, and I would just hit comma. And then I would do my quotation marks again. This time we want it to be less than or equal to our upper limit. So I'm just going to hit the less than, equal to, and we want it to be less than or equal to this cell right here. Okay, and then we can just close our parentheses to end our formula and hit enter. And it tells us that we have 2. For this one, I am going to go ahead and make this a whole number because our frequency would be a whole number. So we have 2 values that fall between 3,418 to 5,132. Now, I don't have to retype that formula. This is where the nice dragging feature is helpful, because I can just drag it down and it will automatically populate my frequencies here. If you wanted to, you could come over here and sort this column to make it easier. You don't have to do this, but I'm just showing you that this does work. If I sort it smallest to largest, and I'm not sure why, I must not have had this 6,000. So for this, I want to sort smallest to largest, and for some reason it's not sorting that 6,750. All right, I'm not sure why the 6550 is going in front of the 3418. Sometimes Excel gives me problems. So with this, we can see that 3,418 and 4,692 are my only 2 values that fall between my class lower limit and my class upper limit. Okay, so we can see that there's 2 values. So that's what your what this command is doing, it's counting the values that fall between your two parameters. Okay, relative frequency. And another check that you can do to make sure that your maximum wasn't missed is you can come down here and find the sum of this column here. And because I don't have any missing data points, it should be 25. And so we can see that it does add up to be 25. So we can see that we did not miss any values. So that's just our sum of this. And that will help us with our relative frequency. Our relative frequency, remember, is the individual frequency divided by the sum of the frequencies. So what I want to do here is I want to do equals. And I want to do this cell here divided by this cell here, but remember that with my sum, I don't want the H11 to change. I want the first part to change, but I don't want the H11 to change, so I can hit F4, and it will keep that constant. And then when I drag it down, we can see that the H11 did not change, but the H6 changed. So now it's taking this number 2 and dividing it by 25. The next one is taking 8 and it's dividing by 25. But instead of having to do it individually, it will automatically populate it as long as you put the dollar signs around the H and 11. If you don't, it's going to keep trying to divide by values down here. And since there's nothing in here, you're going to get a divided by 0 error. So you want to make sure that you put those dollar signs around the H and the 11. So again, you can type them in or just hit F4 after you highlighted it. The check to make sure that this is accurate is, you can see, is the sum of this equal to 1? So is my sum of this value equal to 1? And it does. That means 100% of our data points are represented. Okay, and then our last column is the cumulative frequency column. For the cumulative frequency column, remember, cumulative frequency is the total that have occurred by the end of the last class, or of that class. So if I look at this, I have a total of 2 values that fall below 5,132. So the first one is always going to be the same as your first frequency. The next one is going to be this cell plus the column. So basically what's happening here is I'm just finding the sum from here to the next one. So I'm going to take this cumulative frequency and I'm going to add to it. There's 2 more that occurred. So I have a total of 2 plus 2, or 4, that have occurred by 6,847. Okay. After I've typed that second formula, I can just drag it down. And you notice that it does end at 25. For this one, I just want to highlight this column really quickly. And it doesn't make sense to have decimal places on this one because of the fact that we're dealing with whole numbers. Cumulative frequency and frequency are always going to be whole numbers. So hopefully this video helped you to be able to build your frequency distribution. If you run into problems, please reach out to me and let me know where you had the problems. If you do have questions, please email me the Excel sheet. I cannot figure out what mistake you made from a picture. As always, thanks for watching.